Daenerys Targaryen and her dragons and the others are the White Walkers are the two primordial forces at the center of the A Song of Ice and Fire book series, Game of Thrones if you only watch the show. And I've argued that the story is called that, A Song of Ice and Fire, the story of ice and fire, because that is the actual point of the story. The point of the story is these two primordial forces, the forces of life and death, fighting each other, trying to win out, while everyone else is distracted by the pointy chair because, ooh, I want to be king. So the Iron Throne is ultimately the red herring of the series. It is the distraction from the actual conflict that's going on, the conflict with very real stakes. Now, in my argument, as I've mentioned, the others over here represent the ice, and ice represents death, and so the inverse of that, we have the dragons and Daenerys, who represent fire, who represent life. And if you're wondering, like, oh, is that really what those two things represent? Yes, George says it. You can find video of him saying it. It isn't, Jon Snow being the Song of Ice and Fire, whatever. Like, no, that's not what we're talking about. It's dragons and it's White Walkers, okay? But because I've argued that the dragons are a positive force in the world, they are a force that's representative of life, and therefore they are good, I have gotten some comments, questioning that. Just like this one over here, which says, how is Dragonfire different than the fire of the Lord of Light? If we accept fire equals good, that means the Red Priests should also be on the side of the positive, right? Well, sort of. They should, but they're not. At least not fully. And that's because I'm going to posit that what's actually happening here is it's not as simple as just fire fighting ice and vice versa. And actually, it's fire fighting ice, ice being a corruption of water. And if you think I'm getting a little woo-woo here, I do apologize. I know I was just bitching about theories in my last video last night, but just remember, this is all speculation. It could mean nothing, and it probably means nothing, but we're just having fun, okay? But I'm positing that ice is really supposed to represent a corruption of water because water magic is something that exists in the universe. And when you think of fire's natural opposite, it's typically not ice, it's typically water. So those two seem like the positive, like primordial forces in the world, ice being a corruption of this one. Also, this is an old man of the river from the River Royne. The Roynar were known to practice water magic, and so that's why he's down here. Ain't the turtle cute? So, if we consider the idea that the healthy or positive forms of magic in the universe are strictly fire and strictly water, then the corruption of those elements would be ice over here, and ironically, shadows over here with the Lord of Light. Because remember, according to Melisandre, shadows are children of the Lord of Light. They're a good thing. But are they? Because if we look at the different magical disciplines in the world, you have the Valyrians who practiced fire magic, but also blood magic, which that feels like a corruption of water magic. And then you have the Roynar and the Children of the Forest, specifically. That's also very important to remember. The Children of the Forest and the Roynar are practicing water magic. And we know the Children of the Forest were also practicing water magic because remember, they used the Hammer of the Waters when they were fighting the First Men, and then I think possibly the Andals? I don't actually think they used it against the Andals. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But they used the Hammer of the Waters, which was this big, form of water magic to break the Arm of Dorne, to basically split the continents of Westeros and Essos to stop the First Men from flooding into Westeros. Didn't ultimately work, but then they tried doing it again at the neck in Westeros, which is like the part that separates the north from the rest of Westeros. They tried to do it again, didn't work, and then you just got a bunch of bogs and swamps. And then as for fire, if you accept the premise that Lightbringer during the first long night was a dragon, as I think is very evident if you pay attention in the text, Lightbringer being the flaming sword that Azor Ahai, the hero who ended the long night, used, if you believe it's a dragon, then that dragon was, the savior of humanity. So again, two things that are ultimately kind of natural and good, but then what is the weird version of each of these? So you have over here ice being the weird version of water magic, and then you have the Lord of Light, and specifically shadow binding, which is the magic found in Ashai, being the weird corruption of fire. And if you remember that the legend of Azor Ahai comes from Ashai, we know that at least in the distant past, fire magic is now probably related with that area. So if shadow binding were to develop in that area as kind of an offshoot of fire magic, I think that kind of makes sense. Yes, I know there are logical leaps here, and we're really putting all those teeny tiny pieces together like I just complained about yesterday, but you know what? I don't care. I'm a freaking hypocrite, and you're still here, so fuck you too. Okay, don't fuck you. I'm just, I get hyped. I think it's very important to keep these two like corrupted offshoots in mind because at the start of the series, these are the only two that currently exist in the world. Remember, fire magic kind of went out first with the Valyrians and then fully with the death of the dragons, partway into the Targaryen dynasty in Westeros. And then the Rhoynar have all but basically lost their water magic as they, were driven from the River Rhoyne and then had to eventually like settle down in Dorne. And there are like whispers that there was like a little bit of water magic here and there, but it seems to have like mostly gone away. And then same with the Children of the Forest, because they have been depleted so much, their water magic or connection to that has mostly gone away. And so all that is left of magic in the world isn't the like natural good versions, it's the corrupted versions. You have the others in the far north, which we see being active at the start of the series. Probably because the good forms of magic have like fully dissipated by this point, which is probably why they're stirring, in my opinion. And then on the flip side, all you have left of fire magic, the magic that's supposed to represent like life and warmth and love and like goodness, which that isn't just me. This is how George says that he like perceives fire. He perceives it as a positive thing, in opposition to how he perceives cold. He really hates ice. He hates the cold. He talks about the like really like cold winters of, I don't remember if it was his childhood or college years or something. He doesn't like the cold. That's the point. All of fire magic being left is the Lord of Light cult, and shadow binding is a corruption of what a fire magic is supposed to do. Fire is warmth. Fire is a means of life, of survival, and the corruption, especially in the Lord of Light cult, is the enslavement of living people, because the Lord of Light cult uses slaves. All of the priests and priestesses are slaves that were bought by the temple, which once again is a very interesting duality, because both of these corruptions enslave portions of humanity. The others, the White Walkers over here, they enslave the dead. That is how their magic functions, whereas the Lord of Light enslaves the living as a means of, furthering their own magics. So back to the commenter's original point, if fire is supposed to be good, shouldn't they be good? And yes, they should, but they are not, because they are not acting in the best interest of humanity, and therefore are a corruption of the element that they are meant to represent. And so the fact that these are the only two things that are like still existing in parts of the world, they're not like fully, spread out or anything, but are existing in parts of the world and growing in strength, it's very interesting that at the beginning of the series, we have other things about the world that are unnatural. You have the seasons that are all like lasting years and years long when they're not supposed to. That is like some kind of weird magical thing that is happening in the world. George has said, and even like in the text, it says from like some of like the fake Maester writings that by their calculations, seasons should only last months like they do in the real world, but there is something causing them to all be out of whack. And we can deduce that it has something, at the very least, to do with the dragons over here, because the dragons, when they fully died out, it's noted in the histories that the winters became harsher and longer. So this unnatural imbalance gets worse with the removal of them. So if we follow that logic of like the going out of fire magic in the world led to a further imbalance of the seasons, we can also like assume that possibly something similar happened with water magic, and especially with the Children of the Forest, because remember, the Children of the Forest filled all of Westeros. That was entirely their domain, and they practiced water magic. And then when the first men came, they dwindled and dwindled. They had a bit of a peace there for a few thousand years, and then they dwindled again during the Long Night, and then the Andal invasion, until like today, there is barely anything left. So we can assume that probably over the course of like the first men arriving and all of the children like slowly losing their population and therefore losing their practice of water magic, that they were probably the impetus of the season starting to get out of whack, and it just gets further and further worse with the loss of the dragons. So to correct the imbalances caused by these corruptions of these magics, we have the return of the dragons as a miracle, because remember, that's what George describes it as. It's a miracle. They are brought back as an attempt to, course correct. And then simultaneously, you have all of the weird magic that's starting to stir up north, beyond the others, like having to do with the Children of the Forest, having to do with Bran and Green Seers, and stuff that has to do with their magic. Not to mention, a lot of us assume that the Isle of Faces, which is a, isle important to the Children of the Forest in the middle of the God's Eye Lake, is going to play something important later. So maybe there's a source of water magic there that also needs to be reactivated to fight these fuckers off. So yeah, bad, good, tell me how dumb it is in the comments. Love y'all, okay, bye.